Landing on my heart. Chapter 1. Jiangqing, Autumn. A gust of wind blew away the thick clouds that covered the moon in the night sky, and the light that shone on the ground brightened, and the rice in the field was reflected in a dark gold, and shallow waves with the wind. It's a suburban farmland in the early hours of the morning, so quiet that it's as if the plants are sleeping. The asphalt road connected to the field gate chases the light all the way to the front, and is cut off by a yellow lacquer, looking at the magnificent airport runway. The airport at this point, which is very different from the field, is brightly lit and busy. A Boeing 737 lands smoothly, and a dozen shuttle buses move forward in an orderly manner. Cecile Ruan pulled the flight case and walked quickly to the meeting floor of Hengshi Airlines cabin crew. The wind was blowing under her feet, and her forehead was covered in fine sweat. After entering the elevator, she took out her mobile phone and looked at the time, 12:41, less than 5 minutes left before this pre-flight cooperation meeting. The elevator doors opened, and Ruan Cecile walked through the crowded lobby and turned to the conference room corridor. At the door of the B-32 conference room, several flight attendants wearing the same blue uniform as her stood together, chatting together. Cecile Ruan, why are you here? Jiang Ziyue in the crowd turned around and asked. Cecile Ruan caught up a little and breathed a sigh of relief. I encountered something when I went out. Jiang Ziyue is the purser, and I have to mention, pay attention next time, forget about the rest, you know that today's flight is very important. Cecile Ruan nodded and said yes. Today's flight, Jiangqing direct flight to London, belongs to the core international flight of World Airlines. What is special is that Louis Fu, Deputy Director of Operations at World Airlines, also boarded the flight. Usually, Louis Fu travels mostly by private jet and does not have many opportunities to take the World Airlines, so Jiang Ziyue, as the purser, immediately saw the passenger list and gave instructions in this cabin crew. Cecile Ruan glanced at the conference room again. Haven't come out yet. Jiang Ziyue, well, I don't know what this flight is rubbing into. Our captain is still in the bathroom. Then I'll also go to the bathroom to tidy up the scarf and make up my makeup. Cecile Ruan was afraid of being late when she left the dormitory, so she trotted all the way, her neck sweaty, greasy in the silk scarf, very uncomfortable. After Cecile Ruan finished speaking, she hurriedly went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet and washed her hands, dipped her index finger in water to pin the 2 strands of scattered hair behind her ear. She looked at herself in the mirror, her delicate makeup, her meticulous curly hair, her dignified and slim uniform, not bad but featureless. Only the silk scarf around her neck, which was a bit crooked like a rabbit lop, made her look like she was a little motionless from the other flight attendants. But it's just the difference in her eyes, and no one else will notice. Now this crooked and interesting silk scarf also had to be untied by herself and then refastened. While lowering her hand, Cecile Ruan touched something in the inner bag of her uniform. She paused, unbuttoned, and reached for the thing. It was a letter with a red wax seal on the envelope. This is what caused Cecile Ruan to go out late. This afternoon, roommate Si Xiaojun learned that Louis Fu was flying with Cecile Ruan, so she wrote this letter, and then told her to find an opportunity to give it to Louis Fu. Seeing Cecile Ruan, who didn't seem to be very willing, Si Xiaojun said with red eyes, let's read books together every day, prepare for the recruitment exam together. Obviously we will register next week, but the Feiyang plan will be cancelled if it is cancelled. Don't you really want to fight for it again? Feiyang program is the internal recruitment program of World Airlines, and every year a part of Hengshi Airlines' internal employees will be selected for pilot training, regardless of position and gender. This year, Louis Fu, who is in charge of the flight department, cancelled the project, seeing that it was time to register for the flying plan. This is just a small change for others, but it is simply a fatal blow for people like Cecile Ruan and Si Xiaojun who rushed to enter the World Airlines with this plan. Cecile Ruan opened her mouth, as if she wanted to refuse, and Si Xiaojun said again, I sent him many emails without receiving a receipt, and now there is only this way. I know you think this method is ridiculous, but what if? What if Fu is always an approachable and kind person, and he reads my letter and is willing to think about it again? And, Cecile Ruan only raised her hand at that time, interrupted Si Xiaojun's words, and accepted the letter. What are you doing? Suddenly, Jiang Ziyue pushed open the door and leaned in half of his body. The captain is here, hurry, there's a meeting. Cecile Ruan quickly hid the letter behind her and nodded, okay, here it comes. This small movement was captured by Jiang Ziyue, and his eyes swept alertly. What did you take? Cecile Ruan didn't want Jiang Ziyue to see what she was holding, but the subconscious hiding action just now was too obvious, but it meant that there was no silver 300 taels here. And Jiang Ziyue's inquiring eyes were handed over, and Cecile Ruan could only gently shake the things in her hand. That's it, nothing. After Jiang Ziyue saw the envelope clearly, her pursed lips relaxed. What a mess, hurry up, don't rub it. Cecile Ruan stuffed the letter into her inner bag, buttoned it and walked towards Jiang Ziyue. Because Louis Fu was included in the guest list, the captain paid special attention to this pre-flight cooperation meeting, and spoke for 20 minutes longer than usual. It was time to board the plane, but they were informed by the tower that they had to be delayed for an hour due to traffic restrictions. The time relaxed again, the captain stood up and said to the two co-pilots next to him, "Go buy something to eat." The three got up and went out, leaving the crew in the conference room. Another delay, everyone had to wait, not counting the flight time, and gradually there was a whispered complaint in the conference room. During this time, Cecile Ruan went out to answer a call. Before the phone hung up, Cecile Ruan heard the chatter in the room getting more and more lively, as if discussing something happy again. "What are you talking about?" Cecile Ruan pushed open the door. "I heard you outside." Jiang Ziyue rolled up the passenger list and held his temples, tilted his head and smiled. "They are betting to see who can get President Fu's phone number today." Cecile Ruan let out a puzzled what for? "What do you say?" "Soak him, of course. It's hard to meet the same flight with him, a rare opportunity, this is not the time to stay. 10 hours of long distance, I don't believe I can't find the opportunity to contact us, it's really not okay, let's learn from others to splash coffee or something, ha 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 ha. It's too hard to splash coffee, I think I don't wait for the bump to take the opportunity to fall, just fall into someone's arms. Splash coffee. Wrestling, Cecile Ruan's eyes twitched. 10 years ago, idol dramas were not performed like this, okay. But since everyone said this, they could hear that they were really just joking. Cecile Ruan sat down with a smile, his nails scratching his temples. "What are you dreaming about?" After speaking, he was stunned for a moment. How to get the words out of your heart. The atmosphere in the conference room froze for a moment. Soon it became enthusiastic again with a nonchalant statement. "Dreaming is not illegal, and..." The man said in a low voice, "Mr. Fu's brother, the other Mr. Fu's fiancé, is a flight attendant, and the two met on the plane. If you put it here, if you become the boss lady in the future, don't forget to give me a promotion, if nothing else, let me be the purser first. Yo, just help me change shifts, last time, if I become the boss lady, you will immediately be the purser. Then I will thank you in advance, but what if I am the future boss lady?" Cecile Ruan listened for a long time, becoming more and more confused. "No, why are you so excited, in case the other party is an old man with a belly bigger than a pregnant woman? Do you soak too?" As soon as these words came out, everyone trembled with laughter. Cecile Ruan was even more confused. "What are you laughing at?" "Oh, it seems that our Ruan really doesn't listen to things outside the window. Come, sister, show you the photo." Jiang Ziyue hooked Cecile Ruan's neck with one hand, took out her mobile phone with the other, and turned over a photo to show her. The photo was apparently taken secretly, with Louis Fu wearing a crisp suit and a black coat as he walked toward the company's headquarters. His shoulders are wide and his legs are long, his steps are large, his straight back and smooth lines of his legs complement his clothing, and his aura seems to penetrate the photo to catch people's eyes, making the surrounding characters automatically blur. Even if the photo doesn't capture his face at all. No wonder the flight attendant is so excited, it is understandable. But just by looking at it, Cecile Ruan completely erased the adjective approachable and kind in his heart. Impossible, absolutely impossible. These two adjectives have nothing to do with him. The people inside were joking presumptuously, completely ignoring that outside the false door, Wang Lekong, the manager of the cabin crew, had a face as black as Guangdong. Standing next to Wang Lekong is Louis Fu, the protagonist of the center of this topic. The floor lights are bright, and the occasional sound of hurried footsteps echoes in the long corridors, clearly audible. But it was not as clear as the laughter inside this door. This laughter was like a knife, and it drilled into Wang Lekong's ears. He glanced at Louis Fu quietly, only to see that he looked down at the document in his hand. His eyes were calm, as if he had not heard the conversation inside. But if he really didn't hear it, why would he stay here? The sound in the room became more and more presumptuous, and Wang Lekong was like a needle on his back, and he couldn't wait to rush in and drink the people inside. But Louis Fu was silent. Where did he dare to move first? In a moment, Louis Fu slowly closed the document in his hand and returned it to Wang Lekang intact. Wang Lekang reached out to take it, but the document stopped slightly from the palm of his hand. "This is how your recent rectification has worked." In a word, Wang Lekang tensed his back, not knowing how to respond. It's funny to say that 2 months ago, a beautiful talk happened on Hengshi Airlines international core flights. A double-cabin flight attendant accidentally spilled coffee on a VIP passenger. This guest is not ordinary, and he is the youngest son of the major shareholder of Jiangqing Iron and Steel Industry. But because of this service accident, the two not only did not have a grudge, but formed a relationship, and a relationship came quickly and enviably. Since then, flight attendants have quietly followed suit, and the service accident rate suddenly soared during that time. If nothing else, this kind of thing was met by a small shareholder of World Airlines and told to Louis Fu as a joke. The love of men and women cannot be stopped by external forces, but it is a taboo in the service industry to carry out private desires with the convenience of work. So at the departmental summary meeting that month, Louis Fu mentioned the matter, and Wang Lekang immediately said that he would rectify the chaos. Who wants to be at the moment when Wang Lekang reported his work? This chaos was hit by Louis Fu. If they don't want to do this job, they can bring it up at any time, and Hengshi Airlines has never forced them to stay. Louis Fu loosened the strength in his hand, and the document finally fell into Wang Lekang's palm. Although it is only a few pages, it weighs as much as a pound of iron. Landing on my heart. Chapter 2. I don't know how long it took. Jiang Ziyue coughed twice. Okay, don't make trouble. The captain will come up later. As soon as the words fell, the door of the conference room was pushed open, but it was Wang Lekang who came in. His perennial smiling face was wrinkled, and the clouds were thick, and of course everyone could guess that nothing good happened. A room full of people looked at each other, and no one dared to speak first, so they could only look at Wang Lekang with bated breath. Wang Lekang stood at the conference table, his stomach was angry, and his face changed and changed. But this person is usually used to Sven, and he doesn't shout much when he is angry, and finally he stretched out his finger and pointed to a few people in front of him. Forgot everything you said at the last meeting. I tell you, in the future, give me honesty. You can do whatever you want after work, but the working hours give me more honesty. If you do some more, all of them will fuck me. Cecile Ruan frowned slightly. She was going to deliver a letter to Louis Fu on the plane in a moment. Wang Lekang should not be pointing at her, right? Probably not, he doesn't know anything. But when people are weak, they always feel that a look from others is meaningless. Cecile Ruan wanted to look for some clues on Wang Lekang's face, but unfortunately only saw his angry back, and the door that was slammed was still shaking slightly, leaving a room full of people inexplicable. Boss, what's wrong with this? Who knows, is menopause here? Who provoked him? Someone suddenly woke up. Is it because President Fu is on this plane today? No, let's just talk about it today. How will he know? Okay, Jiang Ziyue, as the purser, faintly felt that it had something to do with the joke they had just made, ready to board the plane. In the end, everyone did not dare to determine why Wang Lekang was angry, but they did not dare to make it again, and they were honest like emotionless robots on the plane. After the captain finishes the round-trip inspection, the boarding gate is ready to release the first-class guests. But before that, you have to welcome special guests. The captain led the crew to stand respectfully at the entrance to the cabin. Cecile Ruan was supposed to be in the second row, but she was the tallest in the cabin crew and stood conspicuously in the crowd, so she automatically retreated to the last row. Half a minute later, the one everyone was waiting for finally appeared from the covered bridge. Only for a moment, Cecile Ruan clearly felt a subtle change in the atmosphere around him, and several flight attendants next to him leaned forward slightly. The night in the early morning is as thick as ink, and only the incandescent light of Yongdao is bright. Louis Fu strode over, holding his cell phone and making a phone call. Until he approached the passenger hatch, he saw the black pressure pressing a group of people, frowned almost imperceptibly, and then hung up the phone. He was followed by a young man of the same age, who was supposed to be an assistant or secretary. The two of them entered the plane one after the other, scanning everyone. Spacious plane, inexplicably there is a sense of oppression. Cecile Ruan looked at him secretly, like a drum in his heart. Believing in Si Xiaozhen's evil, he actually hoped that such a person could be soft for a while. Obviously, this person is full of the words "I have no heart." The captain was older and said with a smile, "President Fu, welcome to this crew." Louis Fu stretched out his hand to shake him, said, "Hard work, and then looked at the flight crew on the side, and suddenly bumped into Cecile Ruan's gaze. The two lines of sight collided, and before Cecile Ruan could react, he looked away and then stepped into first-class unabashed disregard. Cecile Ruan even wondered if that glance was an illusion. After the plane entered the cruise state, the flight attendants began to move, and when they were busy in the lounge, several first-class flight attendants still did not hold back a whispered discussion about Louis Fu, who was sitting in the front row at the moment. Cecile Ruan also took a few sneaky glances as he passed by Louis Fu. He sat in the same row as his secretary, and the reading light on his head deepened the contours of his face. It's better than a real person. Such a person, the son of the chairman, and at a young age, parachuted into the top. It is no wonder that people think about it. Cecile Ruan touched the letter in his bag and had already retreated countless times. Where in the world there are so many people with different appearances, Louis Fu's temperament has shown that he has always stood in the clouds, and 1/10 of ordinary people are delusional to talk, not to mention extravagant others. But as Si Xiaozhen said, try it and don't lose anything. If it doesn't work, forget it. Cecile Ruan thought so, walking slower as she walked, thinking about how to talk to him for a while. Just when it was time to deliver coffee, Cecile Ruan got some motivation and immediately walked to the storage room. Jiang Ziyue was also preparing food next to her, squeezing her eyebrows at the freezer, and chanting words in her mouth. Cecile Ruan had something in her heart and didn't pay attention until Jiang Ziyue poked her. What god are you walking? Cecile Ruan coughed twice to hide her embarrassment. What did you just say? I noticed the temperature of the coffee and went. Jiang Ziyue cautiously glanced towards the cabin and said, let's exchange it in a while. You go to serve the person on the left, and I will go to the right. On the right, Louis Fu's side. Cecile Ruan pursed her lips and didn't answer immediately. Jiang Ziyue gently bumped her with his shoulder. Okay. Cecile Ruan smiled and said, but why? Jiang Ziyue was plating the fruit, staring at the orange, and poked it with a fork. My ex-boyfriend is over there. Huh, Cecile Ruan glanced outside. Compared with Fei meeting the boss, the probability of bumping into an ex-boyfriend is even smaller. Cecile Ruan asked again, didn't you read the passenger list yesterday? How can I not be mentally prepared at all? I saw it, but so many people in the world call Zhang Wei. How do I know it's him? Jiang Ziyue said and lost a piece of orange. She picked it up and threw it into the trash. It's really shameful. Cecile Ruan pulled her inside and whispered, there's a guest coming out over there, you whisper. Jiang Ziyue forcibly sorted out his expression, but he still couldn't help but say, when I just boarded the plane, I deliberately teased me, stupid, smelly stupid, men are stupid. Cecile Ruan patted her shoulder to calm her emotions. Don't get too excited, ex-boyfriend, just treat yourself as a normal passenger. Fart ordinary passengers, where are ordinary passengers so stupid? Jiang Ziyue looked at Cecile Ruan solemnly again, really, you are still young, you will know when you fall in love a few more times, men are stupid. Cecile Ruan answered twice, agreed to exchange with Jiang Ziyue, and the two walked out separately. After a full row of food deliveries, Cecile Ruan poured coffee for the guests who needed it. When she reached the end, she turned her head to look at Louis Fu's row. Jiang Ziyue had already followed the food truck, while Louis Fu looked down at the iPad on the table. Cecile Ruan's palm was slightly warm, hesitated for a moment, and walked towards Louis Fu. Mr. Fu, do you need coffee? Louis Fu didn't look up, reached out and pushed the cup. Thank you. Cecile Ruan bent down to pour the coffee, paused, and didn't leave immediately. Noticing her strangeness, Louis Fu looked up. His eyes were born narrow and long, and his fan-shaped double eyelids slightly opened converged the sharpness of his entire face, but the tail of his eyes rose upward, adding a bit of ostentativity. It's just that when he glances at people coldly, no matter how beautiful the wind and moon are, it is mixed with frost. Cecile Ruan retreated uncontrollably. After about an hour, Louis Fu's secretary called Cecile Ruan to add coffee. She took out the letter, put it on the bottom of the pot, and walked over again. After pouring coffee for the secretary, he turned to look at Louis Fu. He still holds an iPad with a 3D representation of the plane's interior. The picture is clear. Louis Fu zooms in to see the details, his finger slides across the screen, and it seems that he automatically blocks the people around him. He was so focused that Cecile Ruan was embarrassed to disturb him, but the letter at the bottom of the pot was a constant reminder to her that she was not treating people and not treating people. But he seemed really busy, and even if he did, he wouldn't necessarily look at it. Just as Cecile Ruan's heart was at war, the secretary spoke, "Is there anything else?" Cecile Ruan panicked nervously and whispered, "Do you still need coffee?" The secretary raised an eyebrow, and his fingers tapped the coffee cup in front of him, which still had half a cup inside. Cecile Ruan acquiesced that he didn't need it and turned to Louis Fu. "Do you still need coffee?" Louis Fu's fingers flexed slightly against his chin and gently rubbed. Then he looked up at Cecile Ruan. "No need." Cecile Ruan knew this was the answer from the moment he looked up, and was not surprised, nodded and turned away. Louis Fu glanced up at her back, and the impatience in his eyes grew. The secretary smiled on the side. Louis Fu looked over, and the secretary immediately smiled and handed over a piece of paper. "This is the drafting tender for ACJ 31. Louis Fu took it and glanced at the back in front of him. What did Wang Lekong do? After a while, the flight attendant returned with coffee. She still seemed to be holding something in her hand. "It seems to be a letter." Louis Fu looked up at Cecile Ruan. The woman in front of her was wearing the traditional light blue uniform of Hengshi Airlines and had a beautiful face. And she is tall, with a thin waist and long legs, and an excellent figure. It's a pity that the red lips are thick and the smile is stiff, and there is no memory point. Cecile Ruan saw Louis Fu looking at her unabashedly, thinking that he had a reluctant request. He became more and more nervous, his brain was buzzing, his throat tightened, and he whispered, "Mr. Fu, do you need to add coffee?" When she said this, she clutched the letter at the bottom of the pot, her fingers rubbed uneasily, and gently pushed the letter out, thinking of when the right time to hand it out. This small action was seen by Louis Fu. Louis Fu saw a look of desire but anticipation on her face. He turned off the iPad screen, pulled up the cuffs, and said nonchalantly, "Don't you want to do this job?" Cecile Ruan was stunned, thought of the content of the letter, and said, "Yes, I don't want to be a flight attendant of World Airlines, I want to do." Louis Fu gently turned his wrist, his eyelids lifted, and he spoke, "Boss lady." Cecile Ruan, you might as well dream. Cecile Ruan didn't move for a while. There is only one thought in the head. Men are fools. Landing on my heart, Chapter 3, Men are fools. There are no words that describe Cecile Ruan's mental activity at the moment more accurately than this sentence. She subconsciously took the letter back, squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying, wanted to say 2 words, but found that she couldn't say a word. Fortunately, Louis Fu stopped looking at her after saying this, or directly when there was no person in front of him, reached out and turned off the reading light, then put down his seat, lay down, and closed his eyes. The passengers around were quiet, with the occasional sound of flipping books or water glasses clashing. No one seems to have noticed here, but Cecile Ruan knew that he was glued to his eyes at the moment, all for pleasure. Cecile Ruan gritted her teeth and turned away with her coffee. Back in the storage room, she put the coffee pot down heavily, startling Jiang Ziyue on the side. "What's wrong with you?" Jiang Ziyue asked. "Nothing." Although Cecile Ruan was holding his breath in his heart, he did not dare to spit on the boss in front of the purser. Although she and Jiang Ziyue usually have a good relationship, colleagues are colleagues, and the gossip behind them may become a knife that day. Jiang Ziyue asked again, "By the way, see Xiaozhen's things. Did you give it away?" Cecile Ruan said coldly, "Forget it, don't send it." After speaking, Cecile Ruan's eyes suddenly widened. "You know what?" Jiang Ziyue shrugged, turned to lean against the cabinet. "She also looked for me this afternoon." Jiang Ziyue is more senior than Cecile Ruan. Earlier she was Si Xiaozhen's master, with flying skills, and because she was a purser, Si Xiaozhen felt that she might be more talkative, so she first asked Jiang Ziyue for help, but Jiang Ziyue directly refused. "Not to mention that the matter is not about yourself. This matter is too ridiculous, why take it on yourself?" Cecile Ruan figured out the joints and nodded. "I haven't found a chance yet. Opportunity and everything is rhetoric. People are sitting there, really want to send it over is not a matter of minutes." Jiang Ziyue leaned closer and asked, "Don't you dare." "Yes, don't dare." Cecile Ruan pulled the corners of his mouth and smiled weirdly. "I'm sorry. What if people think she sends love letters for a while? How come, there's nothing to be embarrassed about?" Jiang Ziyue picked up 3 steaks and squeezed past Cecile Ruan. "I'll go and deliver supper to the crew, your side. Let it go quietly when the lights go out for a while, and no one knows." When Jiang Ziyue said this, Cecile Ruan's mood quickly turned a corner. It seems to make some sense. Just now Louis Fu obviously misunderstood her and felt that she was seducing him. How does Cecile Ruan explain this kind of thing, saying that no one else may believe it? She can only send the letter out, and when Louis Fu sees the content, she knows that he has misunderstood. But at this moment, Louis Vu's dragged 250,000 will definitely not accept anything from her. So after the lights are turned out for a while, everyone is asleep, and she can unconsciously stuff the letter into his seat. When he woke up and saw the content, the truth was revealed. Okay, Cecile Ruan made a decision and waited in peace. 20 minutes later, the cabin lights went out, most of the passengers were reclining their seats and wearing blindfolds to sleep, and the sound of breathing could be heard quietly all around, except for a young boy of 7 or 8 years old in 7A, who was playing cartoons outside. At this time, the plane is like a large dormitory, and Cecile Ruan feels like a dormitory ant. She walked up to the little boy lightly and reminded him to bring headphones to watch cartoons. The little child hummed twice and said, "My ears hurt." Cecile Ruan squatted down and whispered, "Little friend, you will make noise when you go out like this." The child was still unhappy, pointing to the adults on the side and saying, "My father is not disturbed." Cecile Ruan looked at it, his father with an eye patch and noise-canceling headphones. He couldn't hear at all. He slept like a dead pig, and it was strange to be noisy. In this case, Cecile Ruan had no other way but to persuade bitterly. "Little friend, when you arrive in London, it is early in the morning, you don't sleep at this time, you will doze off tomorrow when you get off the plane, and you have no energy to play." Her voice was gentle and deliberately soft, and it was difficult for anyone to say no, even if it was just a child. The little boy thought seriously for a moment, and then turned off the iPad. "Then I want to pee." Cecile Ruan reached out to him, "Let's go, I'll send you there." Although it is now cruising, the plane may encounter turbulence at any time, and it is Cecile Ruan's responsibility to keep the little ones safe. As he passed Louis Vu's side, Cecile Ruan glanced down. He was lying flat, breathing steadily, and sleeping peacefully. Cecile Ruan suddenly felt that this was an opportunity, so he stopped and said to the child, "Little friend, wait for me." Then she bent down and placed the letter next to Louis Vu's pillow. When his fingers touched the pillow, Louis Vu pursed his lips, startling Cecile Ruan into thinking he wasn't asleep at all. Fortunately, he just tilted his head. But Louis Vu didn't open his eyes, and the children on the side could see clearly. "Sister, are you sending a love letter?" "Cecile Ruan, how can this little fart understand so much?" "It's not." Cecile Ruan didn't want to explain more. "Let's go, the bathroom should be occupied in a moment." The child did not hear Cecile Ruan's words, and looked like a little adult. "This brother is very handsome, but sister, don't be too shy. I have received love letters." "Nothing, it's normal." Cecile Ruan almost lost his breath. "You're a little fart and don't give a speech here, okay?" What if Louis Vu wasn't asleep and was just recuperating? Cecile Ruan took his third deep breath today and dragged him to the bathroom. After only a few minutes, Cecile Ruan returned with the child to find that Louis Vu was not sleeping, had straightened the seat back, turned on the reading light and was looking at the iPad. So fast that Cecile Ruan wondered if he hadn't really fallen asleep just now. However, seeing that his expression is normal, he should not have heard it. "I don't know if he saw the letter." As she passed Louis Vu's side, Cecile Ruan couldn't help but poke her head out. The letter did not seem to have been discovered by him, but fell to the ground because he straightened his seat. Cecile Ruan had mixed feelings in his heart, and now he not only had to send it again, but also had to pick it up in front of him without knowing it. It wasn't just Cecile Ruan who saw the letter, but also the children next to him. When he saw it, he also said loudly, "Sister, your love letter fell on the ground." Cecile Ruan, "I see it, I don't need you to talk much." "No, it's not a love letter." Louis Vu looked over when he heard this. After just glancing at it and finding that the person next to him was Cecile Ruan, he quickly turned his head again, with an unmeaning smile on his lips. It wasn't that it didn't mean anything. Cecile Ruan clearly felt the sarcasm on his face. "Laugh at what? What's so funny? This really isn't a love letter." Cecile Ruan discovers that since Louis Vu got on the plane, he has spoken to her in 5 words, 2 of which are just 2 words, but has transformed her from a gentle fairy into an explosive bag that can detonate high in the air at any time. What kind of devil is this? Of course, Cecile Ruan only dares to roar inwardly and keep smiling on the surface. "Little friend, this is not a love letter." "What's that?" "It's a love letter." "Isn't it also a love letter?" Cecile Ruan glanced back, and fortunately, Louis Vu didn't seem to notice their conversation. Getting the little fart back into his seat, Cecile Ruan crouched to fasten his seatbelt and touched his forehead. "Rest early." After speaking, she took a deep breath before slowly standing up and turning to look at Louis Vu. His attention seemed to have been completely drawn to the iPad. giving Cecile Ruan no look. This is best. Cecile Ruan walked up to him, quickly picked up the letter, and handed it to him. President Fu, don't misunderstand, this is me. Without saying a word, the plane suddenly jolted without warning. And the magnitude was still a little large. Many passengers woke up, and the seatbelt indicator quickly lit up. Cecile Ruan has been flying for 2 years and knows from experience that this time it may not only be the airflow, but even the rain of cumulus clouds. There was no time to think about anything else. Safety was the most important thing. She did not dare to move, and immediately grabbed Louis Fu's seat back to ensure her stability. In a panic, she looked down and saw Louis Fu unhurriedly put away his iPad and looked up. Seems to say something. At this time, the plane radio suddenly sounded, interrupting Louis Fu's words. Ladies and gentlemen, due to the strong convection airflow caused by our aircraft, please return to your seat, fasten your seatbelt, and close the lavatory. At this moment, the child next to him was frightened and yelled, desperately trying to pounce on his father, and began to unfasten his seatbelt after finding that he was restrained by the seatbelt. Cecile Ruan immediately shouted, "Little friend, don't unbuckle your seatbelts. It's just a bump in the airflow, don't be afraid." But where could the child hear Cecile Ruan's words? The father of the child next to him had just woken up and sat up in a daze, apparently not yet figuring out what was happening. You can't really let him unbuckle his seatbelt and leave his seat, and it's only troublesome to bump on the plane for a while. Cecile Ruan didn't have time to think about it, and immediately wanted to run over and hold the child. But as soon as she let go, the plane was once again bumpy, her feet were unstable, her center of gravity was off, and the whole person fell down. Fell impartially in Louis Fu's arms. Cecile Ruan. The breath of his body lingered around Cecile Ruan, and his body touched, and Cecile Ruan's upper body was almost all against his chest. As soon as I looked up, I met his gaze. He tilted his head slightly, and the banter and disdain in his eyes were not concealed in the slightest. Cecile Ruan interprets it as, "I see how you still explain it." At this time, Cecile Ruan's heart beat faster again uncontestedly, as if he was about to jump out, and the blush on his face spread directly to the roots of his ears. She clearly heard her own heartbeat, knock knock. It's also too embarrassing. Louis Fu spoke with this heartbeat, what misunderstanding. Cecile Ruan. In addition to silence, or silence. This scene, I said I didn't want to seduce you, do you believe it? I don't believe it myself. It was at this time that the plane slowly returned to calm. The two looked at each other like that. One blushed, and the other was so calm that there was no emotion in his eyes. After a long time, Louis Fu, who did not receive an answer, spoke again. "How long do you plan to sit on my lap?" Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan immediately stood up, her hands not knowing where to put them, brushing her hair, and her fingers inadvertently brushing her face. At this temperature, if she had a mirror, she should be able to see her face flushed as if she had been in a sauna. Cecile Ruan closed her eyes and put the letter on his desk. "This is what my colleague asked me to give you, and it contains some small ideas about her plan to fly." After putting it down, Cecile Ruan did not dare to look at his expression anymore and left directly. Walking into the lounge, just as Jiang Ziyue came over and said, Ruan, you just." Jiang Ziyue stopped halfway through saying and patted Cecile Ruan's shoulder. "It's okay, the bump scared me just now." Cecile Ruan stood steady. The child who just 7A was scared and crying. "You can help me bring a glass of juice, I'll go to rest first." For nearly 10 hours thereafter, Cecile Ruan passed by Louis Fu's side countless times. Fortunately, he slept for nearly 5 hours, and the other 5 hours were fully focused on doing his own thing, without giving Cecile Ruan a look at all. But even so, Cecile Ruan felt uncomfortable every time he passed by him, always feeling that he would raise his head in the next second, look at her mockingly, and then say some humiliating language. Fortunately, this did not happen. After landing and seeing off all the passengers, Cecile Ruan almost didn't take off a layer of skin, and he never felt so tired from flying a long distance. However, she rubbed her shoulders and walked back to the cabin, and when she passed Louis Fu's seat, she almost turned her back on her back. The letter was left untouched on the table. Why is Cecile Ruan sure it is intact? Because Si Xiaozhen was solemn and sealed her mouth with wax. Cecile Ruan took countless deep breaths today and picked up the letter. Co-authored that she experienced such ups and downs today. It was all her one-man show.
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Landing on my heart. Chapter 4. After getting off the plane, Cecile Ruan opened his phone, and all kinds of WeChat and missed calls were so numerous that they were about to overflow. After getting on the bus to the hotel, Cecile Ruan sat down and began to reply to messages. Jiang Ziyue moved faster than Cecile Ruan, and sent a message in a group of colleagues, saying that he had arrived in London, asking if any colleagues were still in London, and asked if any colleagues were still in London, and asked to go to play together. This group is a private group that they built, with flight attendants, organic chiefs, co-pilots, and some accompanying aircraft and safety officers. Someone asked Jiang Ziyue who the crew was this time. Jiang Ziyue said one by one, and asked, "What for?" "What do you mean?" Cecile Ruan glanced at the heated discussion in the group and knew that Jiang Ziyue was talking about her. But before the brow could furrow, two private chats came. One was Captain Yu, who was stationed at the London base this year, and invited her to dinner. One was the empty young man who went to London yesterday and invited her to play together in the afternoon. This isn't the first time they've shown favor to Cecile Ruan, and certainly not the only ones. Somehow, Cecile Ruan feels that she has had particularly good luck this year, and she is overwhelmed by endless suitors, especially after she took the cover of the World Bank's March magazine this year, and there are several people who add her to WeChat every week through the channel. Cecile Ruan turned down the two men, saying he had an appointment today. At the same time that Cecile Ruan sent the message, Jiang Ziyue on the side glanced at her mobile phone mockingly. "Captain Yu, you even refuse him." Captain Yu's thoughts about Cecile Ruan are not well known, but anyone with a discerning eye can see a little. But in the end, it is still a private matter, and it is not happy to change the mobile phone that is so clearly taken out and said, and it is still a mobile phone that is not viewed without consent. "I made an appointment with a friend in London today." Jiang Ziyue didn't believe what she said, or felt that this was just a prevarication reason. She pouted and looked down at her phone. "I'm still curious about the reason why you haven't had a boyfriend. Is it too high-sided?" Cecile Ruan, "It's not. I just don't think about that right now." Jiang Ziyue raised his eyebrows and shook his head lightly, looking at the entire World Bank. "Captain Yu looks one of the best, only 28 years old, with an annual salary of 1 million, Chief Captain Reserve. How many people in the company are watching? And you still can't look at it." Cecile Ruan glanced sideways at her, taking in her expression. Could it be that Jiang Ziyue is interesting to Captain Yu? Captain Yu is very good, but at the same time, his flower name is also outside, and in the environment of the airline, waves of beautiful flight attendants emerge one after another, causing him to change his girlfriend as fast as changing clothes. "There's no point, you can't see it." Cecile Ruan whispered, "It's not my type." There was a soft snort next to him, with a bit of sarcasm that saw through everything. How to explain this kind of thing? Cecile Ruan felt that she and Jiang Ziyue were not enough to talk, so she stopped talking and continued to flip WeChat below, only to find that Si Xiaozhen sent her several messages 4 hours ago to inquire about the situation. Cecile Ruan replied with 6 words, "No delivery, no drama." Si Xiaozhen did not return because she was already on the flight to New York at this time. After arriving at the hotel, Cecile Ruan and Jiang Ziyue stayed in the same standard room. Now at 10:30 in the morning London time, Jiang Ziyue is removing makeup and preparing for bed. Cecile Ruan did not have her ability to reverse jet lag, and was afraid that she would sleep at this time, and she would be sleepy and insane on the return flight 2 days later, so she made an appointment with a friend to meet during the day. "By the way, Ruan, what happened on the plane today?" Jiang Ziyue held the mask and closed his mouth one by one. "I saw that you were all sitting on President Fu's lap." Cecile Ruan, who was changing clothes, paused. Can Jiang Ziyue not say the word thigh so accurately? What thighs? Just didn't stand firm when bumpy. Jiang Ziyue smiled, because the mask paper was thick enough to hide his expression. Late summer and early autumn border, with the scent of flowers in the wind and the chill. In the rain in London, Cecile Ruan wears a white shirt and jeans, plain like a small white flower swaying in the wind. Cecile Ruan felt that he was indeed quite swaying, flying for more than 10 hours, trying to hold on and not sleeping, and he was really unstable on his feet. Ruan, have you arrived in London?" Bian Xian's side was very quiet, but he also suppressed his voice very low. "Baby, I just got off the plane, I can't wait to call you. Today you must go to a place with me, there is a surprise." Before Cecile Ruan could answer, the other party hung up. It can be seen that I really can't wait. But Cecile Ruan likes Bian Xian. I like that she is warm and funny, and I like to eat and drink with her. Okay, but where do we meet? A few minutes later, Bian Xian replied. I'm sorry, I was so excited just now, I forgot to tell you. Where are you? Cecile Ruan sent his own location. Then we are very close, you can come directly to W.T. Airport and wait for me, I will come out in about 40 minutes. W.T. Airport, a private airport located in London. Cecile Ruan had landed at the airport, so she was no stranger and walked straight there. As for why he went to the private airport to wait for Bian Xian, Cecile Ruan was not surprised, because Bian Xian was a private flyer, that is, a flight attendant of a private jet. This private airport is her boss's. In fact, private airports are not much different from ordinary airports, at least from the outside. Cecile Ruan bought a cup of coffee and stood in the lobby on the arrival floor, keeping an eye out for people coming out of the exit. Today there is not much traffic, the footsteps of the desk servants are hurried, the people waiting outside are anxious, and it seems that only Cecile Ruan walks leisurely, taking a sip of coffee from time to time, as if he came to play. Bian Xian did not come out, and Cecile Ruan sent her another message. I've arrived. I'm on my way. My boss met the person in charge of the airport and chatted for a while, and I was almost at the exit now. Why are you still with your boss when you get off the plane? That's the surprise I want to tell you. The owner had a private yacht party in the evening right on the Thames, and he invited me and agreed to bring my friends. Cecile Ruan almost choked on a sip of coffee. So you're going to take me? Yes, you'll accompany me, right? I'm so bored alone. Cecile Ruan did not reply to the message for a while, and Bian Xian sent several more messages in a row. The owner is so nice. What a fun and hospitable old man. Let's go together. Let's go. Yachts on the Thames. Maybe this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Cecile Ruan couldn't stand Bian Xian's text message bombardment and agreed. 6 months ago, Bian Xian also asked her if she wanted to resign and come to the UK, and his boss had a cooperative friend who had docked with Chinese business in recent years and wanted to recruit Chinese private flights. Cecile Ruan is smart, has a science and engineering background, is fluent in English, learns things quickly, and is beautiful, making her the best choice for private flying. And the treatment of private flights is not comparable to ordinary flight attendants. The boss who owns a private jet does not care about the salary at all. Sometimes the tip received may be the salary of ordinary people for half a year, and can fly with the boss. This kind of work is enviable. But Cecile Ruan refused, and one of them stayed in Jiangqing and the other went to London. While looking up, Cecile Ruan saw Bian Xian come out of another exit. Wearing a big red uniform and dragging a flight case, she was particularly conspicuous in the crowd. Bian Xian waved at Cecile Ruan from a distance. The airport was lit up, and Cecile Ruan strode towards her with a smile. After not seeing each other for so long, the other party seems to have changed a lot, lost a little weight, but also became more beautiful. Cecile Ruan's eyes unconsciously floated with joy at reuniting after a long absence. However, just 10 meters away from Bian Xian, Cecile Ruan saw 2 more people coming out of the exit. The one at the head was so temperamental that he immediately caught Cecile Ruan's attention. Before Cecile Ruan could change her expression, she met Louis Fu's gaze. And she still kept smiling and walked in the air. At that moment, Cecile Ruan's first reaction was, how could he be at this airport? The second reaction is, he doesn't think I'm following him on purpose, right? Cecile Ruan's smile gradually stiffened at the corners of his mouth. How did she show up here? She's really preoccupied. Cecile Ruan was almost certain that Louis Fu thought so, because the moment he saw Cecile Ruan, his steps paused, and then he turned around and walked towards another exit. Cecile Ruan, am I special? Ruan, Bian Xian rushed over as a bear hug, and abruptly interrupted Cecile Ruan's brain supplement. I miss you so much, do you miss me? Ruan. Bian Xian shook Cecile Ruan's shoulder. What's wrong with you? Cecile Ruan took a deep breath. She found that after meeting Louis Fu, she always took a deep breath. Sooner or later, he may die under his suit pants due to lack of qi and blood. It's okay, I'm so happy, it's a little silly. Cecile Ruan threw the coffee cup into the trash with a loud bang. Bian Xian looked Cecile Ruan up and down, but, how do I feel that you are not very happy? So I need to be happy now, and even want to drink. Cecile Ruan hooked Bian Xian's shoulder. Let's go. In the evening, the banks of the Thames are full of pedestrians and tourists, and the noise of high and low is washed by the river breeze, as if it has become pleasant. Instead, the river is quietly flat, and in the midst of the floating light, the yacht is leisurely like a swan, and only those who are in it can feel its glitz and luxury. Cecile Ruan wore a burgundy dress, long curly hair and shawl, and Bienxian's clothes like snow. The two are full of light, walking in the shadow of the yacht's clothes, and sideburns are still the focus of attention. Bienxian took the wine, held Cecile Ruan, leaned on the edge of the fence and pointed to a silver-haired old man on the deck and said, "That is my boss Alvin." He said that in order to welcome an important guest today, a party was specially held. Cecile Ruan turned around in response to a blond man's overture and lowered his voice. "What's the use of being handsome? This is England, and most people don't like women." Bienxian hid his smile, while Cecile Ruan raised his chin to look at the cruise ship. Alvin, a wealthy local man who can build a private airport, is a no-brainer, naturally dressed, a band in tuxedo playing a symphony on the deck, and a waiter shuttling through the place where he stays, which shows how much attention he attaches to this guest. Cecile Ruan blew the wind on the bar and said, "What guest? Your boss attaches so much importance to it. Actually, the main thing is that my boss likes to be lively, so he likes to hold such parties. Of course, guests are also very important." Bienxian looked through the crowd, looking for the guest, but he didn't land. T Airport is about to be acquired. World Airlines. Ah yes, it's the World Airlines where you work. World Airlines is going to buy T Airport. The son of the World Airlines boss came to investigate. What happened to you? The cup in Cecile Ruan's hand almost fell into the river. You said, the guest is the son of the World Bank boss. Bienxian nodded, yes. No wonder he showed up at T Airport today. Cecile Ruan's mood is indescribable, and she even wants to leave the yacht now. The yacht was driving right in the middle, and she could jump into the river. As he spoke, Bienxian waved his hand towards the middle of the crowd. Hey, my boss called me over. Cecile Ruan immediately looked over. Under the bright lights, the man in formal clothes who slowly walked out beside Alvin was holding a glass of wine. His 10 fingers were well proportioned and slender. More slender than 10 fingers were his legs, standing far away, dressed in a suit, and his temperament was heavier than every guest present. That's not who Louis Fu could be. As if sensing something, Louis Fu also looked over. When he met his gaze, Cecile Ruan almost subconsciously wanted to turn around and avoid it, but his feet did not move. In the crowd, Louis Fu tilted his head and handed the cup to the secretary on the side. Seeing that he was leaving, the secretary asked, "President Fu, do you want to rest?" Louis Fu shook his head and drove toward the fence. He came, and he came confidently again. Cecile Ruan gripped the foot of the cup and fastened the shoulder bag chain with her other hand. Hey, Cecile Ruan suddenly thought that when she went out today, she brought the letter written by Xiaoshan. She desperately wanted Louis Fu to take a look at the content. It doesn't matter if you change your mind, as long as you don't misunderstand her. Before Louis Fu walked over, Cecile Ruan immediately rummaged through his bag and pulled out the letter. President Fu. Louis Fu stood in front of Cecile Ruan. His expression was not as cold as before. Su was the reason for drinking, and his eyebrows were a little frivolous. He hung his head and his eyes curved in a nice arc. It's really coincidence. Cecile Ruan. You say it's a coincidence. It's quite a coincidence. Cecile Ruan ticked the corners of her lips. Don't think about it, I was invited here by a friend. Louis Fu was clearly unconvinced. It is impossible to invite Cecile Ruan on such an occasion unless she is the daughter of some invisible rich man. But none of that matters. Cecile Ruan handed over the letter in his hand. You didn't read this letter before, so please take a look at it, so as not to misunderstand what my intentions are. Louis Fu just looked at her, the corners of his mouth pursed in a shallow curve. Obviously smiling, but there was not a hint of smile in his eyes. Seeing that Louis Fu had no intention of answering, Cecile Ruan planned to open the letter and paste it on his face so that he could see it clearly. But with wine in her right hand, there is no waiter beside her for the time being, and it is impossible for someone like Louis Fu to condescend to bring her a wine glass. So Cecile Ruan opened the letter with one hand. When he took out the letter paper inside and was about to shake open the envelope, Cecile Ruan's hand slipped. And then he watched the letter paper being blown up by the wind and falling into the river precariously. The lingering music stopped abruptly at this time, and only the sound of the river flowing in my ears added to the embarrassment of condensation in the air. The lack of qi and blood is no longer enough to describe Cecile Ruan's current mood. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she saw the expression "I'll see how you explain" on Louis Fu's face for the second time. It was useless to say anything now. and she couldn't jump into the river to pick up the letter. Louis Fu suddenly approached and interrupted Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan subconsciously wanted to retreat, but behind her was a fence against her waist, and there was nowhere to retreat. The river breeze blew in gusts of water, stirring the surface of the water, and Cecile Ruan's hair was blown up and frequently brushed in front of his eyes. Okay, Louis Fu spoke. Hearing Louis Fu's intention to stop thinking, Cecile Ruan breathed a sigh of relief. The next second, Louis Fu put a card in Cecile Ruan's hand. Cecile Ruan looked down at the card in his hand. A key card. While I was thinking about what he meant, I heard him say, "Give you a chance." Cecile Ruan. Are you sick? Landing on my heart. Chapter 5. Cecile Ruan left the yacht with red eyes. Although she was not born into a powerful family, nor is she a proud son of heaven, since she was a child, her suitors have not stopped, and occasionally there are some rumors, but no one has ever humiliated her so much. What gave you a chance? What a coincidence. Who did you think of her? If Louis Fu hadn't turned around and left immediately, if he hadn't worried that this was Boss Bianxian's banquet, if it weren't for the foreigners all around, Cecile Ruan would have spilled all the wine in his hand on Louis Fu's face on the spot. Unfortunately, everything is now a fantasy, missing the best of times, and Cecile Ruan knows that there is no way to explain it with a fool like Louis Fu. Go now. Cecile Ruan couldn't stand this grievance and decided to leave the World Bank, leave Louis Fu's sphere of power, and no longer stay under his company to continue to live like a fool. The hotel was equipped with a computer, and Cecile Ruan opened the Word and began to write the resignation application. During the call of Si Xiaojun, Cecile Ruan scolded her head and covered her face. You still ask? Just because of this, I lost my face. I don't do it, I will resign now. Si Xiaojun was so stunned by Cecile Ruan's anger that she didn't know what she had done wrong, and her voice suddenly choked. What's wrong with you? I want to tell you that I don't have to send letters, I have a new way out. Cecile Ruan held her forehead, her hair was messy, and when she looked up and saw the 4 big words resignation application on the computer screen, she finally calmed down. On the phone, Cecile Ruan didn't care what the new way out Si Xiaojun said. She was full of Louis Fu, patted her chest, tried to calmly tell Si Xiaojun what happened in the past 2 days, and passionately insulted Louis Fu for 10 minutes, using all the derogatory terms that could come to mind. After Si Xiaojun listened, she couldn't get back to her senses for a long time. Why is he? How do I know? I'm sick. Si Xiaojun was silent for a while, and then said, he may have met too many women like this, so he also misunderstood you. Should I be angry then? I don't care, I'm going to quit. I can't breathe even the thought of him now. The atmosphere on the other end of the computer was very depressing, and after a long time, Si Xiaojun said, I left with you. Today my uncle called me. Hua Fei's sighed. A strange mobile phone ringing suddenly sounded behind her. Cecile Ruan immediately turned around, saw Jiang Ziyue standing behind her, originally looked at her stunned, because the ringtone suddenly rang, her expression suddenly nervous, and immediately lowered her head to press the mobile phone. But it was just this momentary panic, and when he looked up again, Jiang Ziyue's expression had returned to normal. Jiang Ziyue said, I just opened the door, you didn't hear it. It means that what Cecile Ruan said to Si Xiaojun just now, she heard it all. I'll talk to you when I go back. Cecile Ruan hung up the phone and looked back at Jiang Ziyue, not knowing what to say. Jiang Ziyue also seemed a little embarrassed, buried his head in the bathroom to wash his hands, came out and sorted out his things, and did not say a word. Cecile Ruan thought that she couldn't hide her resignation anyway, so she didn't bother. But Jiang Ziyue did not hold back after all, and said while folding clothes on the bed, do you really want to resign? Don't be impulsive and think again. The words were sincere, but Cecile Ruan did not hear multiple emotions, like a fixed sentence retention, just talking. So Cecile Ruan just shook her head and said she had figured it out. Sure enough, Jiang Ziyue didn't ask more. Cecile Ruan continued to write her resignation application, and the lamp at her desk was on until 2 in the morning. The return flight took off 2 days later, and when it arrived in Jiangqing, the weather was not very good, thick fog, and many planes could not hover overhead. It was early in the morning, and the nearby farmland began to wake up, and farmers in pairs and threes walked slowly on the ridge with their tools. There was a lot of high-speed traffic all around, and the traffic police command at the airport gate was sweating. There were long queues at the entrance of the departure level, and people stuck in traffic dragged suitcases at the check-in gate. The thick fog cleared, and a plane finally landed slowly, and the hurried walking aircraft led the plane to a precise stop. Everything is as usual at Jiangqing International Airport, and the Hengshi Aviation headquarters located next to the airport is also busy. The glamorous flight attendants pull flight cases between the World Bank and the airport, laughing and laughing every day, but talking about old things. It wasn't until a week later that everyone heard that Cecile Ruan of the 4th Department of the cabin crew had left. It is said that he walked very decisively, and even did not wait for a 1-month handover period, lost a liquidated damages, did not want the year-end bonus, and moved out of the staff dormitory of the cabin crew on the same day. Walking with her is her good friend Cecile Ruan. But everyone's focus is on Cecile Ruan. She was young and beautiful, and only a few months ago appeared in the World Bank's newspaper magazine, became the cover crew attendant, and was in the limelight, privately jokingly calling her the flower of the world, and many single and non-single captains frequently showed favor to her. Wang Lecan has always admired her, and when she mentioned her resignation, she said that she would be promoted to purser to retain, but she still left. The personnel process came down quickly. Louis Fu's secretary said that Cecile Ruan resigned. Louis Fu flipped through the documents in front of the table. Who is Cecile Ruan? That's the one, the secretary coughed, the flight attendant who brought you coffee 3 times on the plane. Louis Fu's movements did not pause without any pause, and the half-finger-thick documents allowed him to take care of these things. But after a moment, he smiled anyway. Because I went to the hotel that day, I couldn't stand the stimulation. The secretary shrugged, probably. Who knows, anyway, Louis Fu usually sees many such women, and he doesn't even know what this flight attendant is called. And Louis Fu drank alcohol that day. If not, Cecile Ruan would have been fired directly by Wang Lecan. Louis Fu didn't speak again, signaling for the secretary to go out. At this time, Hu Tasuk knocked on the door with a stack of documents. The final version of the ACJ 31 procurement contract is out. I have read it 3 times, you will take a look here. The papers were sitting in front of Louis Fu's desk, twice as thick as the stack just now. After all, it is the purchase of aircraft, not the purchase of shrimp and turtles, which affects the future development of Hengshi Aviation. It is precisely because of the ACJ 31's large-scale procurement plan, this self-developed new passenger aircraft will gradually occupy the fleet of Hengshi Airlines in the future, and the demand for pilots of other models will be greatly reduced. Louis Fu decided to cancel the internal flight plan. The fleet reform is coming, the top management of Hengshi Aviation is busy, and the 3 words Cecile Ruan, like her face, only exist briefly in Louis Fu's mind for a while. Fleeting, the goose passed, without a trace. But that doesn't mean others aren't interested in Cecile Ruan's departure. Some people said that she jumped ship, and Beihang gave better conditions. But it doesn't make sense, she's just a flight attendant, so she won't let others dig it. Some say she was proposed and quit to become a full-time wife. Others say she changed careers. There are different opinions, no one is sure, and some people asked her the reason on WeChat. She only said that she wanted to change the environment, but everyone did not believe it. Who would go so quickly to change the environment? It wasn't until a few days later that Cecile Ruan was seen eating with Captain Yu in the famous glass restaurant. Everyone thought that she must be with Captain Yu, so she couldn't wait to go to England. But this plausible statement was immediately broken, and the real reason finally came out. It turned out that Cecile Ruan tried to seduce Mr. Fu on the plane, and after losing his hand, he was stalked in London, and Mr. Fu could not bear it. This happened when the crew department was vigorously managing the chaos, and Cecile Ruan was also a head iron, and he was coquettish, but unfortunately people didn't buy it. So she offered to leave her job to save face before she was fired. Everyone believes this statement, because it was passed out by her crew that day, the details are there, and the authenticity is very high. Some people sigh, if Cecile Ruan is a little more angry, find a young captain with an annual salary of millions, and usually fly with his boyfriend's flight. It is much better than ordinary people. How many people envy, cannot envy, why stare at the position of the president's wife? But the discussion is back to the discussion, usually so busy with work, everyone is busy with livelihood. After a few weeks, only the people in the 4th department of the crew occasionally talk about it. In a few weeks, only people familiar with Cecile Ruan will talk about it. Later, the name Cecile Ruan existed only in the data room where expired periodicals were stored at Hengshi Aviation. Year after year, the rice fields next to the airport ripened 3 times, and a large field was developed and extended into a runway. Hengshi Airlines personnel change old and new. Occasionally the purser and the captain will mention the three words Cecile Ruan when chatting with the captain, and the flight attendant below is confused. Who are they talking about? Later, after the third year, even the pursers didn't mention Cecile Ruan. Cecile Ruan left at her best moment, but her reputation was like a bubble and soon dissipated in the waves. In the past 3 years, many changes have taken place within Hengshi Aviation. The chairman gradually delegated power, and now only controls the affairs of Hengshi Financial Aviation Leasing Company, while the chairman has 2 sons, the eldest one, who controls the business department and docks overseas business at the same time. Louis Fu gradually became richer. The chairman specially sent Hu Tezu, who was the vice president, to assist Louis Fu, but now he is not needed. Hu Tezu returned to his original position. Louis Fu alone controlled the various business support departments, and was the operation director at the time. There are also small gossip, such as the eldest son of the chairman, the marriage contract between the eldest Fu and his fiancée. Louis Fu's secretary became the general manager of the North Africa sales department, and here came a new handsome secretary. There is also that Jiang Ziyue in the crew department and Captain Yu, who was transferred back to the Jiangqing base, are together, and the two of them mix oil every day. Newcomers from the cabin crew also came in one by one, each beautiful as a flower, and there was a new flower of World Airlines, with its extraordinary beauty appeared in internal magazines and periodicals. Guests read it and did not forget. The male employees of the company were ready to move. No one seems to remember Cecile Ruan. After a year, Cecile Ruan was mentioned again because someone saw this new flower of World Airlines and suddenly said, "I think this Anai Tong is a bit like Cecile Ruan." Others disagree. What a god. At most it's a low-grade Cecile Ruan. After Anai Tong knew this, he was very unhappy and ran to ask Jiang Ziyue, "Master, who is Cecile Ruan?" Jiang Ziyue raised his eyebrows, snorted softly, and did not continue. Anai Tong pestered her and asked, "Previous colleagues?" Jiang Ziyue said yes, and Anai Tong asked, "They all say that I am a bit similar to her. Do you have photos? I want to see." She wanted to see why she was low. Jiang Ziyue said, "Where is it like? You look better than her." Anai Tong was still not happy after listening to it. "I'll take a look at the photos, just take a look." Jiang Ziyue had to go to Cecile Ruan's WeChat, and as she used to click in, a line of friends only show the circle of friends in the last 3 days, and there was no content. So she said, "What are you compared to her? Do you want to resign as grey as her?" Anai Tong blinked. "What do you mean?" Jiang Ziyue shook his head and told the past 3 years ago in an extremely emotional tone. After listening to it, Anai Tong almost bent over without laughing. Really fake. Too self-defeating, right? Jiang Ziyue raised his eyebrows. Who said it wasn't? But this is not particularly relieved Anai Tong. She is still very good at the 5 words low with Cecile Ruan, thinking that if she came 3 years earlier, she would definitely compete with her. It's a pity that now Anai Tong is full of powerlessness. Just like Xinhuan can never compete for the old love that died, she can't compare with a person who is not in this company. Fortunately, no one cared about this statement soon, and Anai Tong was also promoted to purser out of the ordinary, which had to be valued by his superiors, and no one said anything about low matching. At present, everyone is most concerned about the upcoming delivery of the ACJ-31 new passenger aircraft. The first batch of independently developed passenger aircraft of Huafei was born, and the orders covered major airlines in China. This means that leading aircraft manufacturers such as Airbus and Boeing face significant challenges. It also means that the future high-altitude field may replace the hegemon. Hengshi Airlines is ready to get ready, the weather is refreshed, the new dedicated runway is completed, and the 6th flight team is established, ready to welcome the arrival of the new ACJ-31 aircraft. At the same time, we are also preparing for the arrival of the ACJ-31 pilot.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.